Some people accidentally became millionaires in ways so bizarre, you'd never believe they actually happened. One man made millions selling pet rocks. Another accidentally threw away a fortune worth over $500 million. And those aren't even the craziest stories in this video. By the end, you'll see 8 true stories that prove becoming a millionaire doesn't always happen the way you'd expect. In 2013, a guy in Wales named James Howells was cleaning up his house and found an old laptop hard drive just sitting there collecting dust, and he figured it was junk, so he tossed it straight into the trash without thinking twice. Turns out that hard drive had thousands of Bitcoin on it that he mined years earlier, back when Bitcoin was worth basically nothing and just a few cents each, and nobody on Earth cared about it, so it sat on his computer like some random forgotten file. But Bitcoin didn't stay worthless for long, and it exploded in value, and that hard drive he threw away like garbage is now worth over $500 million, and it's buried somewhere deep in a landfill under mountains of trash.
I just wish I could go back in time and not throw that drive away.
And here's the part that'll make your head hurt. He spent years trying to get permission to dig up the entire landfill just to find one tiny hard drive. But the city keeps saying no because of environmental rules, so his $500 million just sits there rotting in the dirt while he watches from the outside, unable to touch it.
They own the land, and they won't let me enter onto that land in order to recover my property.
Now, losing a fortune by accident is one thing, but making a fortune from something as ridiculous as a literal rock takes accidental millionaires to a whole new level. And honestly, you won't believe how simple this next one was. Back in 1975, a guy named Gary Dahl was sitting in a bar listening to his friends complain about how much work their pets were and how expensive and messy they were. And he made a joke saying he had the perfect pet that never needed feeding or walking or cleaning up after. He said his pet was a rock and everyone laughed, but Gary didn't let the joke die there, and he actually sat down and wrote an entire fake training manual for owning a rock as a pet, complete with jokes about how to teach it to sit and roll over. He packaged smooth stones in little cardboard boxes that looked like pet carriers with air holes poked in the top, even though the rock obviously didn't need to breathe, and he priced them at under $4 each and put them on store shelves as a joke product.
But one woman who bought one of these brought it back saying it was moving in the box when she bought it, but when she got it home, it stopped moving.
And somehow this joke turned into one of the fastest selling fads in American history, and stores couldn't keep them in stock, and within a few months, Gary Dahl had sold over 1 million of these rocks and became an actual millionaire from something that cost him almost nothing to make. But if you think selling literal rocks as pets is the weirdest way someone stumbled into millions, just wait, because the next story involves a toy that's sitting in your closet right now, and it was never even supposed to be a toy in the first place. During World War II, a naval engineer named Richard James was working on a project trying to build springs that could keep sensitive equipment steady on ships even when the ocean got rough and bumpy. One day, he accidentally knocked one of his test springs off a shelf, and instead of just falling flat on the ground, it did something weird, and it walked itself right off the shelf and down onto a stack of books, and then onto the floor, almost like it was alive. Richard stood there watching this dumb metal spring flip and flop across the room, and instead of just picking it up and tossing it aside, he had this random thought that maybe kids would actually think this was fun. So he took the same coiled spring design that was meant for battleships and turned it into a toy, and he called it the Slinky. And when it hit stores, it sold out in 90 minutes, and it's been one of the best-selling toys on the entire planet ever since. And what's wild is that toy sitting in your closet came from a total accident on a Navy ship. But the next story is about a random idea that made someone rich just by selling literal pixels on the internet. And it's honestly one of the dumbest smart ideas you'll ever hear. Back in 2005, a college student named Alex 2 was staring at his computer trying to figure out how he was going to pay for university without drowning in debt, and he needed money fast, and he had zero ideas that actually made sense. Then he had this random thought that felt almost too simple to work, and he decided to build a website that was just one giant page made up of 1 million tiny pixels, and he was going to sell each pixel for $1 whole. People thought he was crazy because who in their right mind pays real money for a tiny invisible dot on a website? But companies started buying up little blocks of pixels to turn into mini ads and logos just to get attention on this weird new site. And it actually worked because word spread like crazy, and more people wanted in, and within a few months, every single pixel was sold out, and Alex 2 walked away with over $1 million from an idea that costs him basically nothing to build. Now, if you thought selling invisible pixels was random, just wait, because the next story is about a guy nobody suspected had any money at all, and he wore the same beat-up jacket every single day while secretly sitting on a fortune worth millions. In a tiny town called Hinsdale in New Hampshire, there was a guy named Jeffrey Holt, who everyone kind of just knew as the caretaker at the local mobile home park, and he rode around town on his lawnmower wearing worn-out clothes, and he didn't even own a computer or a TV. People saw him grabbing a newspaper by the side of the road or doing odd jobs around town, and honestly, nobody thought twice about him because he looked like he was just getting by like everybody else in a small town. But behind all that, Jeffrey was secretly a smart and careful investor, and he'd been quietly building his savings for years without telling a single soul, and he never once flashed any of it or gave anyone a reason to suspect he had money at all.
I was sort of dumbfounded when I found out that all of it went to the town.
When he passed away in 2023, people finally found out the truth, and Jeffrey had actually built up almost $4 million. And in his will, he left every single penny to the town of Hinsdale to help fund things like recreation and health and education for the people who lived there. And a secret millionaire hiding in plain sight is strange enough on its own, but the next story is about a will so bizarre that people were literally getting paid to have babies, and it's one of the strangest legal fights in history. In the early 1900s, there was a wealthy Canadian lawyer named Charles Vance Miller who loved pranks so much that he decided his final joke would be his own will, and he had no kids and no close family, so he was completely free to do whatever he wanted with his fortune. Instead of leaving his money to charity or relatives like a normal person, he wrote one of the strangest wills in history, and one part of it gave stock in a horse racing track to people who hated gambling, just to watch them squirm over what to do with it. But the wildest part of his will said that 10 years after his death, a big chunk of his fortune would go to whichever woman in Toronto had given birth to the most children during that decade. And just like that, people called it the Great Stork Derby. Women across the city actually competed for this and had large families hoping to win a share of the prize money. And lawyers tried for years to get the will thrown out, claiming it was insane, but the courts said it was legal, and it stood. In the end, 4 women, each with 9 kids, ended up splitting $750,000. And if you think a prank while causing a baby competition is wild, just wait, because the next story is about a man who left his entire fortune to 70 total strangers picked completely at random. In Lisbon, Portugal, there was a wealthy man named Luis Carlos de Noronha Cabral de Camara, and he didn't have a wife or kids, and instead of leaving his fortune to distant relatives, he came up with a plan that honestly sounds made up. 13 years before he passed away, he sat down with a phone book and picked 70 random names out of it, and he had this all made official in front of witnesses at a registry office without telling a single one of these people what he'd done. When he finally passed away, all 70 of these random strangers got a phone call out of nowhere telling them they were about to inherit part of his fortune, and most of them thought it had to be some kind of scam because who actually does this? But it was completely real, and these 70 people who had never even met this man and had no idea he existed suddenly became heirs to his estate just because their name happened to be sitting in a phone book he randomly flipped through. And if strangers inheriting money from a phone book sounds unreal, just wait, because the last story on this list involves an actual cat that ended up richer than most people will ever be in their entire lives. In Italy, there was a wealthy woman named Maria Assunta who found a stray cat wandering the streets, and instead of just feeding him and moving on, she took him in and named him Tommaso, and he basically became her whole world. Maria didn't have any kids of her own, and as she got older, it became pretty clear that Tommaso wasn't just some pet to her, and he was more like her actual family, and she started planning her entire estate around making sure he'd be taken care of. When Maria passed away, everyone found out just how serious she really was, because instead of leaving her fortune to relatives or charity, she left almost her entire $13 million estate directly to Tommaso, making him one of the richest cats to ever exist. Tommaso went from being a random stray cat wandering around with no home and no owner to living a life wealthier than almost anyone watching this video right now, and he didn't have to work a single day to get there. Every single person in this video was just living a normal, boring day, right up until the moment everything changed. And that's the part that should actually scare you a little, because it means you never really know which ordinary moment in your life is about to become the story you tell for the rest of it. Maybe it's a random object in your house, or a stranger you haven't met yet, or one small decision you're about to make without even thinking twice about it. So if this video made you look at your own life a little differently, even for a few seconds, go ahead and subscribe, because next time we're covering people who lost it all just as fast as they got it, and trust me, that one hits even harder.